What's happening, guys, and welcome back to Sliced. Today we are taking a look at the history of one of the most popular dishes on earth. We are looking at sushi. So the earliest forms of sushi would have come around the 9th century. It was definitely not the sushi you see today, but it definitely is responsible for the origin. So what they would do is they take, say, a surplus of rice that they had in the rice paddies, and they would use it to sort of pack fish within. And this is a sort of fermentation procedure that you find across the world, but in Japan this is what they did. It would ferment, the rice would protect the fish from going bad, and so the fish would be preserved, and of course it would produce that vinegar that comes from the bottom, that rice vinegar. The only thing, of course, is that the rice would become bad, you wouldn't be able to eat it, and so they would discard the rice and keep the fish. As time went on, obviously the rice that was being wasted is obviously very wasteful, so they figured out a way to make this more efficient. By adding vinegar to the process, this allowed the fermentation to speed up a lot quicker, meaning that the rice was still edible at the end of it and the fish was still good. So when people think of sushi, they think of the fish. Sushi actually refers to the rice, and the actual translation of sushi refers to something that has a bitter taste, so it refers to that vinegared rice flavor that you get. It's very essential that sushi has that vinegary flavor. Without it, it really isn't sushi, it's just rice and fish. So it's really important that we understand this and respect it. Now, of course, as time has gone on, sushi has become very westernized, it's changed into so many different things. Even these days I've found sushi burritos, whatever that is. But today I'm just gonna focus on two very simple styles of sushi. So we're looking at the nigiri and the maki today. But anyway, before we get onto that, we have to focus on the most important thing, and this is the rice. So I've got some really good quality Japanese sushi grade rice here. It's really important that you don't cut corners. Don't go out there using basmati rice for sushi, it won't work. You have to have that pearl sushi rice. It's the only thing that will work properly because of the starch content, etc. It's going to really hold its shape perfectly. So what I'm going to do is gently wash it in some water to remove the excess starch. We're going to do this 3 times just to remove the excess starch so that it doesn't clump together and it has that sort of individuality that you're looking for. One of the issues that you find if you buy supermarket sushi is that everything's just sort of clumped together, and I want things to stick together because of the starch, but I also want it to have that individuality so that I can taste each grain of sushi as I bite into it. So after washing it and draining it, I'm going to put it into a pan and fill it up with just enough water so that it goes a little bit under that sort of mark on my finger. With basmati rice, I normally go to that mark or a bit extra. I'm going to use a little bit less. Bear in mind, we are vinegaring it, we're going to add some more liquid to it, so you don't want to cook it like perfectly at this point and then overcook it by adding all that vinegar later. So I'm just going to add slightly less amount of water that I'd normally use, bring it to a boil, and once it's boiled, you're going to cover it up and let it simmer down. You don't have to add salt to the rice at this point. Bear in mind, soy sauce is a perfect condiment for sushi. So the soy sauce will provide more than enough sodium in the whole sort of eating experience. So there's no need to overly season it. If you want to add a pinch of salt at this point, you can go ahead. Say if you don't like soy sauce that much. So once that's nice and simmered down, I'm going to take it, and now this is very important, this bit. You're going to use a wooden or a plastic spoon. Don't use metal because the belief is that the metal will break the grains of rice. We're going to transfer this to a large flat sort of dish and just spread it out nice and thin, and I'm going to use a tray to fan it. And what I want to do is cool it, but I also want that vinegar to really adhere and sort of stick to the sushi rice. It's going to make it so much more perfect, as opposed to it just sort of like trickling all the way to the bottom. What I'm going to do is take my sushi vinegar. This is basically a mixture of rice vinegar, water and sugar. You can play around with it based on the kind of flavor that you want. Some people like it sweeter, some people like it with more vinegar. Totally up to you. I've gone for about a 1-to-1 ratio of vinegar to water, using only a couple teaspoons of sugar to kind of balance out those flavors. What I'm going to do is pour that vinegar onto the spoon. That way it spreads that distribution of the vinegar over our rice, making it nice and sort of evenly distributed. And I'm going to use my spatula to fold the rice, chop it, and keep mixing it over, spreading it out again and fanning it. And when you fan it, you'll find that your sushi rice starts to glisten with the vinegar that starts to stick to it. I'm going to taste and keep going until the rice is cool. You don't want to use hot rice for it because bear in mind we're using raw fish, so you want that rice to be nice and cool. Now I'm just using 2 types of fish today. I'm using tuna from yellowfin tuna, and I'm using salmon. You can absolutely use whatever type of fish that you have available. You can use mackerel, you can even use prawns, you can use red mullet even. Like, it's totally up to you. Whatever you have around you, just make sure your fish is super fresh, because if you're eating this raw, you want to make sure that your fish has been purchased that day. Try not to let it go past the 2 to 3 day mark. that's going to be really dangerous. So only use fish for sushi that is totally fresh. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make our tuna into both the maki and the nigiri. So what I'm going to do is cut strips of our tuna off, making it nice and thin. With the nigiri, what I'm going to do is sort of look for an angle on our fish that allows us to cut it in a way that will have enough surface area to nicely cover our little ball of rice. And then we can go ahead and start making our sushi. So nigiri actually comes from the Japanese verb nigiru, which means to sort of mold something into a shape, and that's where nigiri comes from. So you have this sort of molded shape that you're making entirely from your hand with no seaweed involved. This is one of the earliest forms of modern day sushi. And so what I'm going to do is wet my hands. This is very important because the rice is going to be very sticky, so I'm going to wet my hands with a bit of water. You can put some vinegar on it as well if you want. And I'm going to mold a small ball of our rice, carefully placing the fish on top. Normally and traditionally you're meant to put a little dab of wasabi on the rice. I didn't have access to proper wasabi, so I didn't really want to try it. But yeah, authentically that is how it's meant to be. And I'm going to go ahead and do that with our tuna as well as our salmon. And there we have our nigiri sushi finished. Now in terms of our maki, a lot of people might be daunted by the idea of rolling sushi because they don't have the bamboo mat. I actually do own a bamboo mat, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to actually use tin foil just to show you that it can be done. So what I'm going to do is lay 1 or 2 layers of tin foil out onto a table, and this is going to allow you to roll your sushi. We're going to take our sushi seaweed, and the golden rule of sushi is that the shiny side is going to be on the outside, so the matte sort of side you'll be able to see when you kind of see it. I think in the lighting here you can't really tell, but you want to have the shiny side on the outside. And what I'm going to do, again, wet my hands, wet a small part of the top of your seaweed. This is going to allow it to stick, and with the rest of your sushi you're going to spread it out nice and evenly, covering every inch of that seaweed apart from that top strip. And I've taken a thin strip of cucumber as well, and I'm going to double up. So I'm going to do a strip of cucumber, a strip of tuna, a strip of cucumber, a strip of tuna again. And what I'm going to do is fold it in a way where I'm making a double fold. So I'm going to roll it first in a way that crimps it just at the start of the first tuna and cucumber sort of mark. Make it nice and tight, release it back again, and then roll it over again. And that's the important part of this. You want to make sure that you're in control, rolling it, making it nice and tight, correcting that shape and bringing it back to the center again. Don't just roll it and then feel like you've messed up or something like that. Make sure you take your rolls small, nice and tight, and there we have it. And then with a sharp knife, what we're going to do is cut it directly in half, matching those 2 halves and cutting it again. And you can keep doing this to make it however small you want. And that is our maki sushi. I'm going to serve it up with some soy sauce and pickled ginger. The way you're meant to have it is by dipping the sushi lightly in the soy sauce, eating it, and then having the pickled ginger as a sort of palate cleanser between each one. When you look at this, it's going to make you want to say, Lord have mercy. I hope you guys learned something, both history-wise and recipe-wise. Please like, subscribe, follow me on my socials at slice_YT on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and everything else. And I will see you next time. Bye.